Good morning, folks, and welcome to the Hibs Observer Thursday briefing with myself, and rejoined today by Patrick McPherson to look ahead to this weekend's clash with St Johnston. A huge game for Hibs in the race for the top six. We'll talk a bit about Martin Boyle coming back into the squad and perhaps about his comments about his recovery from concussion, and we'll also touch on our exclusive interview this week with Hibs non-executive chairman Malcolm McPherson. Come to that a wee bit later on, but it is well worth a read if you haven't touched on it already. First things first, Patrick, how are you this morning? You okay?
I'm good. Yeah, nice to be back after a wee break. But very, very happy we were able to get Craig on to talk about Saturday's game and just give a bit more of a kind of tactical flavour that I think certainly myself not too accustomed to doing. So I think that's something we'll be looking to do a bit more of going forward, is just to get on a few Wheelkent faces from the Hibs sphere, if you like, just to, I suppose, mix it up a little bit and I suppose give people a break from seeing our two faces 3 times a week.
Yeah, I think that's the least they deserve.
Well, it's been a tough season, so why not give them something nice?
Yeah, I'm sick of the sight of myself, to be honest with you. But yeah, no, it was great to have Craig on. Brilliant insight, as always, from him. And well, as you say there, we're looking to to get him back on as soon as possible, possibly after the weekend. We shall see. Just before we crack on, just a quick word for our sponsors here. We're thrilled to have Weissman, a global leader in the boiler industry known for their top-notch German engineering, sponsor our podcast. They've teamed up with Scotland's very own award-winning installation team, MPH Boilers, making this a perfect match right here in Scotland. Weissman's boilers are engineered to deliver not just warmth, but unparalleled efficiency and reliability. And with MPH Boilers, you're getting service from the very best in the business, a local team that's committed to excellence and customer satisfaction. When you choose a Weissman boiler installed by a Weissman boiler installed by MPH Boilers, you'll also get a free internet controller, making it a breeze to manage your heating anytime, anywhere. And you'll also be offered the first year's service free, because for them, it's all about giving you some peace of mind and just generally making sure that you're looked after. So if your boiler is showing its age or you're just considering an upgrade, this is your chance to get world-class engineering with local expert service. Weissman and MPH Boilers, it's a match made in Scotland. Make sure to check them out and take the first step towards a warmer, more efficient home. Okay, let's crack on today. As we touched on at the top of the show there, St Johnston up next for Hibs at Easter Road. 2 games remaining until the split. Hibs are 1 point behind Dundee. They're currently sitting in 7th place. So St Johnston first, then away to Motherwell to round off the pre-split schedule. And I don't think it's a particularly controversial statement, Patrick, to say that these are they're must-win games, really, aren't they?
Yeah, you're right. I think Nick Montgomery would be the first to say they're all must-win games, they're all big games, and he's right. But I think, especially with the way the sort of battle for the top 6 is going, you've got a few teams still in there for the mix. I mean, I was looking at the table before we came on, and I think there's 5 or 6 teams who could still kind of make that top 6 spot. And obviously you're kind of banking on results going your way at other places, but all you can really do is, take care of yourself. And I think that'll be, one of the first messages from the coaching staff to the Hibs players is, basically win the game, ask questions later. And, I think it could have been a harder run-in, I think. Obviously Dundee, Motherwell both have their strengths. No, not Dundee, Motherwell. St Johnston, Motherwell. I mean, Dundee do have their strengths, but St Johnston and Motherwell both have their strengths. St Johnston kind of a bogey team for Hibs in recent seasons. But it's 2 winnable games for Hibs, provided that the players are playing to the best of their ability and they play as a team and just do something that Hibs haven't been great at doing, which is just take their chances. But yeah, two big games, and you would really want Hibs to be in the top 6 after the split for various reasons. And I can only imagine that's been the sort of consistent message from Montgomery and his staff, which is just, win these 2 games and then, we'll look at the top 6. But, that has to be Hibs every season. They have to be in the top 6 at the very least. They have to be fighting for Europe. They have to be fighting to be finishing as high as possible. And this has been it's been a sort of strange season. It's been a bit disjointed with the injuries, with the management change and everything. But I do think if Hibs can finish in the top 6 and then sort of push for that European spot, it could end up being a better season than it certainly looks like being at certain stages over the last few months.
Yeah, I know. It's wild how, just these, just 2 games in isolation can shape really how an entire season is going to look. But I think it's the predicament that Hibs have sort of put themselves in by the sort of inconsistency over the course of the season. Obviously, we've talked at length about how, injuries and availability haven't aided that at all. But, kind of hoping, I think, Hibs to head into this weekend probably with as much availability in the squad as possible. And again, it's got to the kind of opposite problem for Nick Montgomery, whereas kind of pre-Christmas he was just trying to patch a side together, but now he's actually he's got options there. He's got decisions to make over who he's going to include. So I'll maybe just touch on in a few minutes just what we how we expect the game to pan out. But maybe first things first, we could look at team selection. The obvious talking point is the fact that Martin Boyle is now available again. He's been Hibs talisman for years and years on end now, but we're kind of at the point where over the last couple of weeks, it's been 2 other guys on the flanks who have really been coming up with the big moments for Hibs, really, Eliuan, Mizian, Malida. So I suppose the question is will Nick Montgomery be tempted to put Martin Boyle straight back in for this game, or is it a case of, at the moment, these 2 guys have deservedly played their way into the team and they're probably going to keep their place?
Yeah, we've spoken about this before, that if things aren't broken, there's no point trying to fix it. And certainly I think Nick Montgomery would be the first person to appreciate the chance to have a settled team. There was certainly a time early this season where it felt like there were sort of 3 or 4 enforced changes every week through injury, suspension, international duty, and also just kind of giving players a rest so that you weren't, for instance, playing Rory Whittaker at right back for 90 minutes 3 times a week. I looked at Mizian and Eliuan's contributions yesterday. Eliuan speaks for itself. 21 goal involvements in all competitions this season. He is a frustrating figure. He can be really, really irritating to watch. I think just if you're a fan of football in general, there's been times when even last Saturday against Rangers, there's one pass on and he does another thing, and it's watching on, you think the obvious pass is the one that he doesn't pick. And there's been times where maybe there's been a loose ball that if he just stuck on the afterburners a bit, he could get it, but he chooses not to. And it's I think he can be I think a bit of a polarizing figure, but there's no kind of, it's not really getting past his contribution. 10 goals, 11 assists is really good. And you look at Hibs over the past few seasons since they got back into the Premiership after their sort of 3 seasons in the Championship, and there's not an awful lot of players have made it into double figures in terms of assists. Martin Boyle, I think, has done it on a couple of occasions. Stevie Mallon as well, and it's I think an impressive sort of stat in its own to get double figures for goals and assists, and almost feels a little bit like it's been overlooked by some sections of the support. And I think that's just because he can be a polarizing figure. He can be frustrating to watch. But I mean, he's there's obviously been times where he's maybe defensively he's been a bit suspect. It's maybe led to goals, and obviously that's what you remember. But I think all you have to do is look at how much he's contributed at the other end and think, well, that's what he's measured on. If he's done that more than he's given up goals, then he's doing his job. And for Mizian to have the sort of contribution he's had since he's come in January, after playing kind of 4th tier football for so long, I think has just been really impressive. It's been exactly what Hibs needed. He's obviously scored 4 goals in 4 games on the bounce, and I think it's said this yesterday in the piece that I did. He's linked up really well with Yuan. Obviously, the pair well known to each other after playing together for France at sort of youth international level. Yuan obviously sold Hibs to Mizian quite successfully, and I think it's been really good to see the way they've kind of dovetailed in the final third. I think it's 3 or 4 goals they've been involved in together, and I can see that continuing. I just think they've both got their strengths. They're both obviously they've got similarities in their style of play. They like cutting inside. They like going past the man. They've got an eye for goal, but they do have their differences. And I just think with those two on either flank, Hibs look like a really kind of quite a daunting prospect for defenders. And I think you even seeing against Rangers, I know it was a defeat. I know there was one shot on target, which was Mizian's goal, but there were a few times where they were getting a bit of joy down the wings, and you would hope that they can kind of take that to the next level against a team like St Johnston and then against Motherwell, and just kind of continue the good form really, because I think you look at the Rangers game and it was a defeat, but there was a lot to like about it, and I think it's so important. We're saying these two games are so big, and you just want to kind of keep that momentum going. You don't want to make changes unless you absolutely have to. And in terms of Martin Boyle and bringing him back in, there's maybe an argument for bringing him back in because you know what he can bring, but at the same time, having someone like that to bring off the bench when the opposition defence is getting tired. I mean, we know how much Montgomery likes to make use of his subs as finishers, if you like, rather than just right, the 11 who started are getting knackered, so we'll start pulling off the more tired of the players and put the subs on. It is about trying to keep the game plan going for as long as possible, trying to stay on top, and just trying to really keep that momentum going until sort of 90 plus minutes. So whoever is on the bench for Hibs, whoever's sort of primed to come on, you've got options there, whether it's Boyle, whether it's Yuan. There's almost like an embarrassment of riches in terms of wide options, which we certainly weren't saying about Hibs not that long ago, actually.
No, exactly. Nice problem for the manager to have, but I don't see any change in that. Kind of obviously fitness permitting is the obvious caveat, and we'll find out about that at this Friday's press conference. But I just don't think you can change the front three. Oh God, that was a mess as it is at the moment, because.
This is why we write for a living instead of speaking.
Yeah, exactly. Aye. Words, yes. Speaking, not so much. But yeah, just as I was saying, I think you can't drop either Malida or Yuan at the moment. As much as an important figure as Martin Boyle has been for so many years. I think just the fact as well, he's had that layoff. He's not played a lot of football. By all accounts, sort of eased back into training, back into full contact stuff. So I think you're right in the piece that you wrote. You're kind of looking to Yuan and Mizian as the two guys over the next couple of weeks to try and fire Hibs into the top 6, because you just can't really argue I know I'm sort of repeating what you said here, but I think it's just worth emphasising the point. You can't really argue with the return in terms of numbers from Elie Yuan, as much as you might get the odd defensive lapse, as much as people think he can be inconsistent, which he can be.
He's a winner, of course he is.
Yeah, I think by definition wingers are inconsistent. Anybody who isn't is playing at the very, very highest level. So yeah, as you say, 10 goals, 11 assists. It's a superb return. I think he's played his way back into the side after he had a few weeks out, which I think at the time he probably needed, and it seems to have rejuvenated him. And he's come back in perhaps with a renewed sense of focus, and he's just playing very well. So I think, as you say, it's good to have Martin Boyle back and available, and he could be somebody you need to bring off the bench, because it will be. As much as Hibs did do some good things, I thought, going forward at Ibrox up until a certain point, it's going to be a completely different game. St Johnston, I don't expect anything too expansive from them. They'll have certainly seen that most, if not all, of the joy that Hibs got at Ibrox in terms of getting themselves into the final third came in mostly in kind of moments of transition. When the ball turns over, Rangers, they do look a wee bit vulnerable to that at the moment. And Hibs were kind of frustratingly got themselves into some really good positions and then didn't capitalise on it from there, which is just it's the kind of difference in this team at the moment, I think, from going to the next level. Just developing a sort of ruthless streak when they get into good positions, especially when you're at places like Ibrox where you are playing against one of the two best teams in the league. You don't quite have maybe the leeway for hesitation or not picking the right pass at the right moments. Your opportunities will come and go in the blink of an eye. So as I said, it'll be a completely different game once you're kind of possibly a bit of a slog. As you pointed out, St Johnston perhaps a bit of a bogey team for Hibs over the past few years. Obviously, Montgomery got his first home win against them all the way back in September. Now, was that September into October? God, it feels so long ago now. We won't talk about the game at McDermott Park because I did have to point out on Monday's show that I'd promised that I wouldn't talk about that winter of discontent again, and I broke that, so I'm not going to do that again, so that I'm dishing out further apologies to people because nobody wants to be reminded of it at this point. But yeah, it could be an attritional game because, I mean, I don't think St Johnston will have any qualms about just sitting in and trying to frustrate, because especially when they saw what a kind of threat Hibs can be in transitions. I don't expect them to leave themselves too open. So then it's a different type of challenge for these forward players then, as it is, can they break this down? Can they wear it down over time? And I suppose as well, where that's having options on the bench comes into its own as well, thrown on against tiring defences, different options. It's one that could need everybody in Saturday, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those games where I think, well, one of the criticisms I've made of Hibs over the past few seasons is that they're quite good at going toe to toe with the bigger teams in the league. So, your Celtics, your Rangers, your Hearts, your Aberdeens, that sort of thing. And, getting results, against, okay, Aberdeen, Hearts to a certain extent, Celtic on the odd occasion, Rangers not so much, as we've discussed to death. But, the biggest problem I think has been, going into these games against teams where they should have more of a chance of getting a result and just not really being able to do it, not being able to find sort of something different or, that extra sort of bit of dig that you need in games like this. And what I would say is that I think the players who they brought in January, I mean, that St Mirren game was, call it an aberration, but I think, the games against Ross County, the game against Livingston, teams who, have caused Hibs problems in the past, there have been, results that have gone the wrong way, but I think the players he brought in, like Mizian, like Emiliano Marcondes, they've got that ability to sort of get something extra from these games, which is what Hibs have been missing. And, even if it's not working out for, say, for example, Mizian and Yuan at the weekend, then you've got someone like Marcondes who can just unlock the defence with the right sort of pass. You've got somebody like Joe Newell can do the same. You've got sort of options for breaking down what will be, quite a kind of stuffy defence. And, you talk about St Johnston being, Hibs bogey team, but they've also got Craig Levine as manager. And, I mean, his sort of relationship with Hibs speaks for itself. And, you've got that extra layer to it. You've also got the extra layer that St Johnston obviously needs as many points as possible to try and, claw themselves out of any sort of relegation battle. So there are lots of different storylines at play, but I would hope that it's going to be one of those situations where, Hibs have actually learned their lessons from previous encounters and, they'll have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C if needed. And the players who you rely on to, kind of unlock defences, to, play those balls that just make a difference. If it's 1-0, if it's a 1-0 win to Hibs, that's what matters. It's the 3 points. And that has to be the main aim. Obviously, it's just get in there, get the 3 points, move on to the next game. So you need players to be on top form, but you also need your players on the bench to be coming off and able to make a difference. And as we've said, whoever starts, whoever's on the bench, I think Montgomery has that. You also look at Nathan Mariah Welsh, who's another person. At the moment, do you change the sort of midfield three? I don't think you do. And then you've got Nathan Mariah Welsh who can come off the bench and make a difference, have an impact. So it does feel like one of those games that, if this was pre-January transfer window and you didn't have the likes of Mizian up there, Emiliano Marcondes, you might be fearing a little bit for Hibs. You might think this is one of those games where, they could come unstuck. You can just, you can imagine St Johnston housing their way to like a 1-1 draw or a 1-0 win. Craig Levine back up the road to Perth, twirling his imaginary moustache and laughing. It's just one of those sort of situations that I think, the way that Hibs are playing, the players they brought in, there's less chance of that happening. I mean, it's Hibs, so there's still every chance that it could happen that way. But it does feel like Hibs have turned a wee bit of a corner. In the past few weeks, I know they lost to Rangers. I know they sort of conceded that late goal against Ross County, but I think for the most part, the team has looked, a lot more cohesive. It's playing as a unit. Even when you're bringing players in off the bench, it's still kind of like still operating as it should be. And that I think should be enough sort of cause for optimism going into this game. But I mean, again, the word of warning is, I'm not trying to be a doom monger here, but the word of warning would be that, we've said this before and Hibs have not shown up, and it's been a kind of ugly performance, and it's been a horrendous atmosphere, and I just think the team's probably got itself or earned itself a fair bit of goodwill from the supporters in recent weeks with the performances, and it's all about kind of building on that and taking it forward and putting in another display that gets 3 points, and then whatever happens elsewhere happens.
Yeah, definitely. I just noticed you used the words optimism and doommonger in the space of about 3 seconds there, which is maybe a really kind of microcosm of how this season is panned out for Hibs so far. So hopefully after Saturday it is the former word that we're using, which I'm pretty sure I said optimism is the first word there. So just moving on from Saturday for now. As I highlighted at the top of the show there, we had an interview on the Hibs Observer website this week, an exclusive interview with Hibs non-executive chairman Malcolm McPherson. Kind of first, a really in-depth sit-down interview that Malcolm has done in the media. And that was courtesy a brilliant piece written by Rob Robertson, who provided that for us. Really, really good interview. I think it was so... there were so many kind of different facets to it in terms of what Malcolm spoke about. We could have probably dedicated an entire show to it, really, to get through all of it, because you're going back well over 20 years, and then working all the way up to the present day. So there's kind of something in it for everybody, really. I think the bit that maybe stood out in terms of back in the day was speaking about the departure of Frank Sauzee at the club, and just the kind of incredible conversation that they had, where Frank Frank basically looked relieved when he found out that he was going. So a brilliant kind of. I love all interviews getting like we kind of hidden insights, we unknown insights into these kind of big moments that you tend to just hear of, especially modern days when manager or players or whatever leave you. It's just you hear about it in a club statement and then a press conference interview. But I always love those kind of wee nuggets where you can delve into what really happened behind the scenes in these big moments. So it was quite an exchange by the sounds of it back then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, and I think it's certainly at the time it was quite. The whole situation, it did get quite nasty almost. There were people protesting outside Easter Road at the decision. And, I think on the face of it, when you look at how quickly managers are hired and fired these days, I think it's 1 win in 15, none in the league. It was I think even as Rob suggests, in the piece, or as Malcolm suggested, that, Frank did look relieved, and you can kind of almost understand that. But for me, it was interesting, I think, to get the kind of background behind it, which was, Frank had expressed an interest, and Alex McLeish, obviously, who brought him to Hibs, and was the outgoing manager, had, I think, given his sort of seal of approval as well, which I think a lot of Hibs fans might not have been aware of. That obviously this is McLeish would have known Sauzee standing in the dressing room, would have seen him. I mean, we look at players nowadays. The sort of senior pros and how they kind of coach other players through the game. And I'm sure it was exactly the same 20 plus years ago. don't really like saying that, but there we are. But I think it's interesting that McLeish did sort of essentially say, yeah, this would be a good move, and
yeah,
he didn't say it in so many words, but I got the impression that Malcolm, through the interview, maybe given his own standing as a Hibs fan, was perhaps a little bit blinded to that decision that every Hibs fan kind of wanted it to be Frank, because I think he was coming to the end of his time as a player, and a player of that standing, with that relationship with the club, with the fans, you don't want to see them leave. You want to see them staying on in any capacity, and it turned out to be, I suppose, an experiment that just didn't work at all. Some pretty kind of awful performances and results throughout that time, sort of compounded by the fact that the first game after Frank's sacking, they won quite comfortably 3-0 against St Johnston, by the way. Just nice little coincidence there. But I think it was interesting to to sort of hear from Malcolm about how Frank kind of took it, which was almost like a kind of acceptance, saying, I'm not the kind of manager that Hibs need at the moment. And, I think I'm not going to repeat what he said, because, it's not, we're still not after the 9 p.m. watershed, so I'm not going to say what he said, but would encourage you to read the piece. Very wide-ranging interview, a lot of ground covered, from sort of Malcolm's childhood supporting Hibs and how he first came to be involved with the club, and then his sort of first stint on the board and as chairman, and then his departure, and then his return more recently. But I think just really interesting to get that sort of, as you say, that insight into what it was like at the time. We all saw the protests outside Easter Road at the time, and the fact that it kind of prompted Frank to stay away from the club for so long before making his return. But I think as well in the piece, it's just interesting to get Malcolm's side of it, because, as you say, he's not spoken about this really at all. And it's I think as a Hibs fan, it must have been quite a hard thing for him to do, especially knowing the reaction it was going to have amongst fans, and then the fact that he left the club shortly afterwards. And again, that other element of the interview where he's sort of saying that they didn't really interview anybody else before appointing Bobby Williamson. He was the obvious candidate because of what he'd done at Kilmarnock. He'd won the Scottish Cup, that sort of thing. And yeah, I think it was one of those situations where you get a rare bit of kind of honesty from somebody in this situation, where they said, we did have concerns over the style of football, which I think sort of came to a head when Bobby Williamson instructed the fans to, if they wanted entertainment, to go to the cinema. But he essentially did what he was asked to do, which was Hibs avoid relegation. They did, finished 10th and everything. But won't say anything more about the interview. It is really worth reading the full piece. It's a sterling job from Rob, who has known Malcolm since, well, pretty much since those days in the early 2000s when Sauzee was hired and eventually sacked. But a really, really good insight into the current non-executive chairman, and obviously good to get that sort of, call it insight, experience, anecdotes, memories from from somebody who has such a connection with the club. And there's also he also gives his thoughts on Bill Foley's investment this summer, and Nick Montgomery and the current team. So very grateful to Rob for doing that, and I think a really informative, really interesting piece. So again, just would encourage you to if you've not subscribed, if you fancy subscribing to the Hibs Observer and reading that article, I don't think you'll be disappointed. So apart from that, I think I'll let the article do the rest of the talking.
Yeah, aye, exactly. Seconded, by the way. It's a really good piece. Really wide ranging, covers a lot of ground, as I say, from back in the day to right up to as things are now. Good stuff in there on Bill Foley and Nick Montgomery as well. So I think might actually be the perfect time to let you all go off and read that if you haven't done so already. Yeah. Well, as I say, thanks for joining us as always, folks. If you stay tuned to our website before the weekend, as always, we'll have all the updates from Nick Montgomery's pre-match press conference ahead of St Johnston. Heading into that game at the weekend. If you like what we do, as Patrick said there, you can subscribe to get access to all our content on the Hibs Observer website, which includes videos like this, interviews, as we say, like the ones with Malcolm. We've got plenty others on there as well, plenty of features, tactical analysis with the aforementioned Craig Nisbet 9125 analysis on Twitter. He'll hopefully be rejoining us on the briefing very soon. And yeah, match day content, pre-match, everything in between. You can also, if you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that subscribe button to help us grow our YouTube channel. That is a huge help to us as well. If you could get on board with that, we really, really do appreciate it. And just all the continued support in general. But going to leave it there now. As I said, back on Friday with press conference stuff, and then we are straight into a huge game for Hibs against St Johnston at the weekend. So as I said, yeah, thanks very much, as always, for joining me. Thanks to Patrick for joining us as well. And we'll see you again soon. Cheers.
Cheers.